And this
Yes,
one, and then,
please.
yeah. All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a delicious lunch. I know I did. Thank you. So the topic of this session is Roots and Intellectual History of Islamophobia and Anti-Religious Discourse in Muslim Societies, and these are case studies. I'm very much so looking forward to this because my own research on Islamophobia, we generally neglect looking at Muslim majority countries, so I think this is really important to see the prevalence and the roots of it. I'll go through and present each of our panelists, and then they'll present their papers. We have The Case of the Arab World by Dr. Nabeel Saadoun, who's an educational expert from Jordan. He's an academic originally from Jordan with a bachelor's degree in Islamic studies from Saudi Arabia in 1980 and a master's and PhD in educational administration from Oklahoma State University in the US. He also got trained by the American Management Association of Strategic Management in 1995 and by Harvard University on school programming in 2000. He has co-authored the popular Islamic Studies school textbook series, I Love Islam, Learning Islam, and Living Islam for all schools grades, which are currently implemented in hundreds of Islamic and international schools in North America and around the world. He has also served in many boards in the US and in the Middle East, including the boards of the Islamic Society of North America and the Council of American Islamic Relations, among others. Do you want to go? Yeah.
First of all, thanks for SIGA and Dr. Sami Al-Aryan for establishing and organizing this conference and for inviting me to this panel. And my prayers and all our prayers actually go to the victims of the earthquake that happened last month in Turkey and Syria. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be merciful with the deceased and also to bring about very speedy recovery to those affected by the earthquake. And to start with, the history of Islamophobia and anti-religious discourse in Muslim society and the Arab world as a case study. I would like actually to start by saying that a main cause for Islamophobia in the world is actually caused by Muslims themselves. Yes, there are other causes which I will outline and talk about, but we should be blamed also for the case of Islamophobia for many reasons. First of all, that we do not really live up as Muslims currently to the ideals and the principles of Islam, and we do not establish the very beautiful model of Islamic nation and Muslim societies. Therefore, when we are looked at by others in the world, they look at a model that is really not a well-established model of Islam. When it comes to industrial and technological advancement, we are away from the front. When it comes even to the morals and the principle of Islam, we are not that also excellent in this regard. So before we talk about the effect of others upon us and blame others, we have to start by blaming ourselves and correcting our behaviors when it comes to self-actualizing the ideals and the morals of Islam. I remember talking about establishing a channel in Washington, D.C. with one of the gurus of media in the world, who was a Muslim. After September 11, I told him we have to establish a channel in Washington, D.C. to represent the ideas and the viewpoints of Muslims, Arabs, and to be directed to the Congress, to the White House, to the media, and to the American society and the Western society in general. So he declined. Muslim embassies in Washington, for example, the most important activity they involve in is not actually defending Islam, defending, for example, Islamic cases like Palestine and so on. It's actually the national day of the country they represent. I remember also when I was in America, talking to one friend that I just met. I told him about Islam, its ideals, how Islam actually prohibits drugs and alcoholism and so on and so forth. So he said, it's strange. I went to the Islamic world. I never met a Muslim that does not drink, because he actually meet with people of his caliber or his like. Extreme practices in the Muslim world and violence in the name of Islam, unfortunately, tainted the name of Islam in the West and around the world. For that reason, we should start by blaming ourselves for Islamophobia and organize to fight it and to resolve its effects on us and on the world. When it comes to the Arab world, 22 countries, all disunited, with problems among themselves. They actually are the hub of divine messages, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and all actually originally were the religion of Islam and are the religion of Islam, with about 450 in population, with all kinds of powers, all kinds of resources, all kinds of major passes and strategic location in the world. If the United States choose to relocate itself, it likes to be in this area. Europe, the same. But actually the Arab world and the Middle East in general really resides in a very important location in the globe. Before we talk about the roots of Islamophobia in the Arab world, let's talk about the soil that surrounds those roots. Europe has its place north of the Arab world, and it has a long history of interaction with the Arab world. It experienced anti-Islamic sentiments since the Crusades, and without going into history, the results and the traumas are known to everyone. And still, this anti-Islamic sentiment is very vivid in Europe, followed by anti-religious sentiment in Europe, which led to the Renaissance and to the separation of church and state. And actually, this church was marginalized and became the European nations chose to be secular and to go on with science and technology and economical advances and so on. And for that reasons, Europe has the mixture of anti-religious and anti-Islamic sentiments, and all actually go against the Islamic nation or the religion of Islam or the faith of Islam when it comes to our interrelations. Now, Christian missionaries were one of the products of Europe, and they penetrated almost all countries in the Arab world, not to mention the Islamic world, Africa, East Asia, and elsewhere. And there was a very dangerous coordination between the missionaries and the colonialism that is followed also. Colonialism, European colonialism, also devastated the Arab world as well as some of the Islamic world. Almost all Arab countries were invaded by colonialism. Before going out of the Arab countries in the mid-1990s and 19th century, the colonial powers by design left behind missionaries, left behind organizations, and not to mention lifting behind governments and regimes that goes along with the colonial powers in a way or another. We should not ignore the presence of non-Muslim minorities in the world and also in the Arab world. A Jewish minority, they were around like in Iraq, in Syria, in Morocco, North Africa, elsewhere. But after the establishment of Israel, most of those minorities actually either migrated to the new state or to the Western states and America. Until now, there are some Jewish minorities in Morocco and elsewhere. The Christian minorities are historically the descendants of some Arab tribes, like the Ghassani or Ghassan, and the Manadira in Iraq, and the Ghassani in Syria and Jordan, and the Captians in Egypt. So those minorities are Christians who remained Christians even after the establishment of the Islamic nation and the advent of Islam, actually. Now, according to Pew Research, there are about 14 to 15 million Christians in the Muslim world. Of course, some some Christian minorities, they actually magnify their numbers. Like in Egypt, for example, they put their numbers between 10 to 15 million. But Pew Research say it's about actually 7 to 8 millions. No matter the largest Egyptian minority, Christian minority is about is in Egypt between actually 7 to 10 million Christians. Most of them are Orthodox. Few of them are Catholics. For example, in Lebanon, there are about 30 to 35% Christians. In the rest of the Arab countries, like in Jordan, for example, we have somewhere between 3 to 5%. So it's small minorities. However, they have their influence and they have views. Now, when it comes to minorities, especially the Christian minorities, the mainstream of non-Muslim minorities, they choose to actually take a moderate position toward Islam. But there are some organizations or some sects within or individuals within the Christian minorities, they choose to target Islam itself and speak badly about Islam. As a matter of fact, some of them in the Arab world still, and many of them, they are in America or in the West, and they propagate a very negative story about Islam. And a matter of fact, you find some Christian organizations in the West, they actually celebrate these individuals and make them as a reference for them to propagate Islamophobic ideas, as you may notice in a very long time until now. Okay. Here comes also the role of elites, Arab elites, who actually studied, for example, in some Western universities, or they studied in the Arab world, but they get influenced by the anti-Muslim ideas, and therefore they are now close to the government officials and always try to shake the image of Islam in the Muslim world and in the Arab world. And unfortunately, all Arab world actually follow through sometimes when it comes to the state officials or state TVs or state media outlet. Arab governments choose, unfortunately, not to fight these ideas. They try to play the balance of power game and try actually to use secularists and sometimes anti-Muslim individuals or ideas against the majority in the Arab world, the majority of the people in the Arab world actually have Islamic principles, have Islamic faith adopted, strong in their holding. And
Dr. Saadoun, sorry, I think we're running out of time. I want to get to the next speakers and
all right, thank you so much.
But thank you for that. I'm gonna move on to our next speaker. We have the case of Turkey with Professor Dr. Yasin Aktay. Professor Dr. Yasin Aktay received his bachelor's degree from the Sociology Department of the Middle East Technical University, where he also obtained his master's degree and his PhD. He became the Associate Professor of Applied Sociology in 1999 and Professor of Sociology of Institutions Associations in 2005. He continued his research and delivered lectures at the University of Maine at Farmington and the University of Utah in the USA. He was also the chairman of the Strategic Thinking Institute in Ankara between 2010 and 2014. And besides his membership at the Turkish Academy of Sciences, he still has opinion columns in the newspaper Yeni Safak and Al Jazeera. Dr. Aktay.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you all and for being here, and for Ustad Sami Al-Aryan and Giga for being able to come to the fort of to organize the fort, and inshallah we hope it means that, and it proves that it became an international. After 3, it is international. It is traditional. We say sometimes there's the first traditional conference that doesn't mean anything, of course. But if it is the 4th, it means many things, inshallah, and it will be inshallah continuing, because we need to instrumentalize such activities and such research and such studies on Islamophobia and any issue that we are interested in. And also, I would like to remind you about Turkey. When you say Turkey and Islamophobia, or Islamophobia in any Muslim countries, of course, it's very contradictory. It looks and it sounds contradictory things, but that is the reality. Unfortunately, when we focus on some cases in Muslim world, and especially in Turkey, about some Islamophobic feelings, Islamophobic reactions, and Islamophobic cases, we see that in the Muslim world, the Islamophobia is deeper than some other places and some other part of the world, in the rest of the world. Even though there was some probably right, maybe right, I might be right, right reasons for some people to be afraid from Islam, because what we see in the Islamophobia case, we see a sort of course, Islam has an image, and the symbolic interactionism theory in sociology requires that the images or the perceptions are depending on our experiences with something. And the perception of something is related, highly related with our experiences with that thing. Of course, the experience of the world now, of the Western world, of course, about Islam is related with their experience, with their what they hear from the media, what they hear from some discourses and mediatic discourses, of ideological discourses, political discourses about Islam, about the Muslim world, about what is happening in the Muslim world. You can imagine every day in the news that we see a sort of many news about what is happening in the Muslim world, about what sort of violent activities and wars and terrorist organizations are killing each other. There are civil war in all part of the Muslim world, especially now. I think most of the weapons produced by the Western world are sold to the Muslim world, and the Muslim world are the only, or are the best customers of all the weapons which are being produced in West, and it is an industry, of course, and this industry is very integrated with each other, and sometimes they are integrating each other, and there is a sort of involvement and involution with each other. Who is producing these wars, and why they are selling all these wars, these weapons to the Muslim wars, where there is a violent war there. People are killing each other, and most of the wars now for recent years are taking place in the Muslim world, in Syria, in Yemen, in Libya, in Afghanistan, in many Muslim world. When we see the Muslim world, the wars are taking place there, and all the news that are produced about all these happenings, of course, rightfully creates an image about a perception about the Muslims. That is an experience, of course. What we are hearing in our homes also is an experience from the news, and this experience, of course, produce or perception, and this perception create a phobia, and in some people, and phobia is something, of course, understandable, and it is called a psychological disease. It's not normal to be phobic, and phobia is a disease, and as long as it's a disease, it can be understood, and that should be approached in an empathy and in a sort of healing, or in sort of therapy. Of course, there should be some reasons which stimulates this fear. Of course, the news on Islamic terrorism, the instability in the Middle East, for example, the Daesh problem, or what's called ISIL industry, is always working to produce this fear. So it is not difficult to understand the emergence of fear from Islam in this world, in the world we are living in. And we should first understand this. We should put that reality, that truth on a side. And at that level, a phobia becomes very innocent in some sense, in some extent. But of course, what is not innocent is the production of this fear, or the production of the industry of the fear, that what we are suffering, I think, as the Muslims is the industry of this fear. And in terms of this industry, I agree with my colleague that when he's saying about the Muslim world is the first reason about this production, of course, but not as Muslim world. The Muslim world not as such. The Muslim world, which is produced also by the colonial plan or program, or the colonial intervention to the Muslim world, because all the problem with the Muslim world is that the Muslim world is not representing the Muslims. The Muslim the ruler of the Muslim world are not presenting their people, and that is one of the most important point that we should put first of all in all analysis of the Muslim world in general. And the story is beginning in Turkey, indeed, and it started about more than 100 years ago, after the First World War. And after the First World War, what we witnessed, the most important thing that happened in the world was the abolishment of the caliphate, or the defeat of the Ottoman state, and which was representing the political body, the global political body of the Muslims. And it was representing them politically. And after the defeating of the Ottoman, and the dissolution of the abolishment of the Sultanates, and then abolishment of the Caliphate, and Muslim became without a body, and Muslims are representing a sort of very, very fragmented organs without body. Or some, if you can prefer to call it body without organs, or organs without body. And this is the case of the Muslim world, and the program which was implemented in Turkey was the beginning of and the model for the Turkish for the Muslim society afterwards. And what we are witnessing is in the Muslim world, the Islamophobia was the normal politics, or what he said is the usual politics. The usual politics in the Muslim world was Islamophobia. because in Turkey, for example, what the program which we witnessed was the abolishment of the caliphate, and afterwards the prohibition of the alphabet of Islam, of the Arabic alphabet, was prohibited. Everything which was representing Islam was being cleansing from the public sphere or from the political sphere, and this cleansing was being associated by a very, very strong Islamophobic discourse. Islam was representing the backwardness, and everything that was referring to anything Islamic or religious was evaluated as a calling for backwardness. And so it was labeled as enemy, and the enemy of the society, the enemy of the progressive ideology, the progressive world, and the revolutionary ideology of Turkey. So it was, of course, all these discourses were extended to all Muslim symbols, everyday life of the Muslims. And so we saw in Turkey the most radical Islamophobic policies were applied in Turkey, were practiced in Turkey at that time. And generations were grown upon this ideology, upon this discourse, unfortunately. And what we are seeing in Turkish scene, of course, alhamdulillah, now we are in a very, very good stage, and we gain as people, because the democracy gave us another opportunities and other occasions to take back some possibilities, or some symbols, or some possibilities, of course. But at the end of the day, the Islamophobic discourses were calling, for example, anything connotating any Islamic point of view or any Islamic symbol were called irtija. And irtija was was another name of Islam indeed. And it was, even though the revolutionary cadres didn't mention directly, sometimes were directly mentioning, but sometimes they tried to use a sort of official discourse about secularism. Secularism is the separation of state and religion, but that was not that much innocent. And of course, if the separation of religious affairs and political affairs, something acceptable because what we see in some religious societies, really sometimes the intervention of religious affairs with political affairs may create many problems. In order to be refraining from such problems, or to take measure against some civil war problems or possibilities, or some others, it may be good measures to take as separation, like what happened in the Western world after a very, very long-standing war, religious wars in the West. But in Turkey, we didn't face any such problems. We didn't have any religious wars with each other. I mean, and Muslims didn't kill each other, and Muslims and Christians lived together for centuries without killing each other, without fighting each other. Even they were in peace together. They were respecting each other. We didn't need such kind of secularism that was imposed upon Turkey with this way. This way that after it was implemented in Turkey, everybody and the religion the official discourse became to label Islam as irtija, and I mean backwardness. That is the reason which made us become reactionary, or become out of the world, we became because of Islam, we became backwarded. Sorry, undeveloped. Yes, it was the main reason for our underdevelopment. That was not the case indeed. That it was a very, very complicated issue to be handled with much more complex analysis, of course, sociological analysis, psychological analysis, of course, but that it was not that much easy. It was very, very simple evaluation to take Islam as responsible, and it was very, very Islamophobic, and it was very, very minority point of view. Unfortunately, this minority, like all the Baas regimes in all the Muslim world, were the model for imposing the regimes upon the majority of the people. There was the minorities, I mean, hegemonized their views, their point of, their very, very, very marginal indeed. It was very marginal. I mean, Kemalism was very marginal ideology indeed. It is marginal ideology in this country, which was imposed upon Turkish society. But unfortunately, after it dominated all the institutions and the educational institutions, they grew some generations ideologically. Kemalism is a very, very simple ideology, very, very simple ideology. I mean, it is not to be taken seriously. It is not to be taken, it is not to be, for example, discussed about, because it is very, very simplest. And the formation of the ideological formation, theoretic, there is no theory, there is no shame. They are just hating Islam. They were just hating Islam. They was just not only Islam. They were hating anything religious, anything religious. It was a sort of atheism indeed. And atheism, somebody, for example, feels in atheism a sort of freedom, for example, has nothing to do with freedom. When they come to power, what they implement in Turkey, in everywhere, we see, I mean, they have nothing to do with freedom. Just on the contrary, when they come to power anywhere, what we saw from them, what we witnessed from their rule was not only imposition, what was only the lack of freedom and oppression upon everyone, and also ignorance about everything. So what we witness in Turkey, unfortunately, this, I mean, the education of the generations was taken, unfortunately, by this ideology. Now, even in Turkey, the official ideology still is Kemalism. The official ideology which is educated in the educational institutions is still Kemalism, and even the 20 years of AK Party couldn't do anything to change these. At least it tried to eliminate some Islamophobic discourse from it, and it tried to make from it a sort of another, to change it, just to transform it into a sort of nationalism, a soft nationalism, to be a positive ideology, to play a role of positive ideology for Turkey as such. But on the other hand, the Kemalism for 80 years, for example, played a role of Islamophobia in Turkey, and all new reformations or some steps for getting some steps of religious freedom in Turkey were under the pressure of oppression of or blame of reactionary again. And we witnessed many coup d'etats or coup d'etat attempts, just for the excuse of protecting Kemalism or protecting the secularism of Turkey against the Islamic hegemony. The 28 February in 1997, for example, the main excuse for this coup d'etat was the development of Muslims or the freedom for headscarf, for example. Only that was the reason for that coup d'etat. It was coup d'etat.
Dr. Aktay, it was. I'm going to cut in. It was. If you can wrap up.
How many minutes?
About 20 seconds.
20 seconds.
Yeah.
You are too late. Okay, that's it. I mean, in Turkey, it is very contradictory and very paradoxical, of course. But the main reason is that we are in the post-caliphate condition now, and this post-caliphate condition created and imposed upon the Muslim world some regimes which are not representing their people, which are not representing the Muslims. And the only way for these regimes to be safe in power and to be in cooperation with the international world is, for example, to create a phobia, to create an industry, phobia industry, fear industry, or the Islamophobia industry in their own world, in their own countries. For example, if there is Islamophobia, it is very easy to tell some other worlds, some other countries, or the international world. I mean, the Western world, that we are here to protect your rights, or to protect your interest. And if we are not, these terrorists, Muslim terrorists, will revolt your interest here, and they will rebel against your interest. And we are, I mean, the Islamophobia industry is set by the Western, Western agents, Western political agents in all countries, unfortunately. And all the days, I mean, we are seeing, and even though, alhamdulillah, we get many spheres, we liberated many or emancipated very places from that
Thank you,
that
Dr.
idea,
Aktay.
but we are still witnessing such things. Inshallah, in the days
Thank
in
you.
the future, we will be liberated completely, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
We'll move on to the next speaker, The Case of Iran by Dr. Setareh Sadiqi. She holds a PhD in North American Studies from the Faculty of World Studies, University of Tehran. Her PhD dissertation concerned the persuasive rhetoric of the Nation of Islam as an African-American movement applying a 10-step propaganda analysis and a theory of persuasive rhetoric of social movements. Sadeqi has a master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies and a BA in English translation. She's an independent researcher, political commentator, and journalist based in Isfahan, Iran. And her research interests include social movements, Iran-US relations, social media, and propaganda analysis. So we have the PowerPoint. Do we have the PowerPoint up? I can do it without it, but if yeah, they do. But if there's a problem, I'm okay.
For the good points that they brought up, and I hope I can add something to the discussion that has already started. And I'm very grateful to be here among other scholars to discuss Islamophobia within Muslim majority countries, which is something that is not as often discussed. So I think by now everyone has heard about what was happening recently in Iran and the protests that started back in, thank you, that started in September and received massive media coverage within the mainstream media, especially the English-speaking media, but also Persian-speaking media funded by powers outside Iran, which are usually hostile to Iran. And it's often not studied because there are not many people in the world who follow the news in Persian, and it's specifically targeted to the Persian-speaking audience. But there are very interesting cases that I think are important to study. Okay, so just to give a hint of what we mean by Islamophobia here, or I mean in my study, is because there are different definitions of the term and it's very broad. So it's not only fear, it can be prejudice or just anything that distinguishes Muslims as other human beings in a discriminative way. So what we were seeing in the media was instances of Islamophobic gestures or slogans happening inside Iran. But the way the media reported the things that are happening was something that I wanted to study and look into. That's why I'm like, you see that slide as Islamophobic by report or by nature? Is the nature of the thing that is happening inside Iran Islamophobic, or is the report on it Islamophobic? Or is it a combination of both of them? So the protest started over the tragic death of a young girl in police custody in Iran. So it started as a women's rights issue and a long-standing discussion surrounding the mandatory hijab law and the way it's enforced in Iran. And I should tell you that the discourse on whether abolishing the mandatory hijab or the way it's enforced, what has been going on for many years. And just with the dynamic of the society changing from like more conservative to more liberal, these discourses change too. Like sometimes they take the majority of what you hear on media, sometimes they're not. But it's an ongoing struggle. And actually, like before this thing was happening, there were 3 incidents prior to the tragic death of Mahsa Amini in police custody that were related to the hijab law. And it was like the last straw for a lot of people. So they had this in their memory. But like, as someone who lives in Iran, I was very surprised by the hyperbolic reporting of what was happening, because I had seen the protests in 2020, in 2019, in 2009, and this one was like no way close to any of those ones, but the media coverage that it got was a lot stronger. And one reason was that it was surrounding women's issues and hijab, which includes Islam, and it makes it easier to otherize the people. Like if you hear about people like coming to the streets because of fuel crisis, like what happened in Iran in 2019, this is something that the working class everywhere in the world can relate to. But if you tell them that people are coming to the streets because they have to cover their head, then this is something that, because of all the Islamophobic baggage and the history of Islamophobia that already exists, this is something that can be found outrageous by a lot of people across the world, no matter how many people or what percentage of the population is actually engaging in the ongoing protests. So I studied, I applied the 10-step propaganda analysis to collect the data. This methodology is developed by Joet and O'Donnell, which are South African scholars, but based in the US. And they ask very good questions in the studying propaganda and the propaganda organizations. So I followed these 10 steps to first collect, to first collect the data and go through everything else that was happening. And the way I did it was I studied key terms that were related to Islam in the social media accounts and websites of certain TV channels that I'm going to talk about. So as I told you, like in the ideology of these channels were mainly to oppose the Islamic establishment inside Iran and to pursue regime change, either by like what we call like soft regime change or a very open call for regime change. And they were aimed at dictating that the political system inside Iran is illegitimate, and a part of this illegitimacy is because it's based on Islam. So as I will discuss throughout the slides, it's very important to understand that great part of Islamophobia actually comes as criticizing political Islam and saying that, oh yeah, Islam is a good religion, but it has to be separate from politics. And that's the excuse, which then allows people to have Islamophobic comments on different countries in the Muslim countries in the world. So was this a form of integration propaganda or agitation propaganda? Integration wants the society to think like them, and agitation is like usually they want to provoke people to take certain actions. And while it was combination of both, agitation in this round of propaganda was very strong, and on social media and on even like in gatherings when you were talking with people, they made it impossible for you not to take any action. Like you had to take a side. You didn't have time to wait. Like no hesitance. You have to take a side or you're complicit. So it was to influence people to engage in certain patterns of behavior, which included protesting. Like the people were trying to protest the establishment through attacking religious identities. And I have to mention that was not a major part of the protest, but they were very much highlighted in the coverage because that's what the purpose of the propaganda was. So like you would see a few examples of Islamophobic acts, like attacking mosques, even burning down mosques, or like tossing up random clergy on the streets, like tossing up their turbans, or attacking people in black chador or hijabis, or even there were, I think, one case of burning the Quran, but it was like very, very minimum part of whatever was happening, but it was very much highlighted. Like there were more than 400 to 500 tweets by like some of these accounts during September to January, and that included those key terms, and the majority of those tweets were Islamophobic. So the pre-existing struggles were represented by which is like the call for changes in the laws, and as well as like the economy also played a role. But it was more a protest for the middle class than the working class. And the pre-existing struggles were represented, but hyperbolically, like a minority that didn't want Islam was represented as the majority that was living in Iran. So, and I told you about the context. So we had like at least 3 incidents prior to what happened in September. And we also had economic problems, mainly caused by sanctions, but also by mismanagement inside the country. A lot of these angles, like they pile up, and then there is something that triggers people to want to come to the streets and demand changes. And the prevailing public mood during the protest was very depressing, very strongly like agitating. We couldn't engage in conversations with a lot of people if you had different opinions, no matter how close you were with them. This is like my personal experience. Like I just tried to avoid any discussions, and within 3-4 months, then you could start talking to people, and you saw that you had a lot of things in common with everyone. It wasn't that it was just something that was agitated and triggered by the media, and you felt hostile to a lot of like different ideas. And as I said, the model of social action was very aggressive and very violent in certain cases, and you were invited to take action as soon as possible, no hesitancy. So these are the channels that I actually looked into, and they're like social media accounts. Iran International is, according to an article by The Guardian, it's funded by the Saudi government, and it's based in the UK. It had the most Islamophobic tweets, and it has the hostile rhetoric, and just last Thursday they actually were interviewing Benjamin Netanyahu in Farsi, which is very, very rare. But they got a lot of reports, and they just recently were kicked out of London because of the reports that were, but they pretended that it was because they were threatened, that the police was after them, but the like documents came out and it was only that they had a lot of lawsuits against them and they had to leave London. So there is Euronews in Persian, BBC Persian, Independent Persian, VOA Farsi, and Manoto TV, and they are associated with different political oppositions or so-called oppositions. Like some of them want the monarchy back, some of them do not really associate with a certain oppositions like Iran International. It's just that they are against Iran. Like Manoto and Independent Persian are mostly towards the Pahlavi return, but the other ones are just as I said, just against Iranian government. And it's very interesting that some of the tweets that they have, they would never tweet in English because for the English media, like the supervision on English media is a lot more strict, and like you can easily report them and you can't easily talk like that, like it's so racist or Islamophobic or even violent. But because it's in Farsi and there are not a lot of supervision on Persian speaking or Persian content, they can easily get away with a lot of things that they say. And as I said, like you could even see instructions on how to make explosives, and like for years they would stay on Twitter. Like, but if that was in English, you could immediately report and it would be taken off. So the question that we ask in this step is who has the most gain from this? And I would say the governments, organizations, and individuals that are behind these channels. And it's not very clear, like some of them we almost know, some of them it's like, there is secrecy in propaganda usually, and it's very difficult to trace them. But like BBC Persian, we know clearly. VOA Farsi, it's part of the US government. And as I said, Manoto and Independent, they have Pahlavi inclinations. But Iran International, according to the article by Guardian, is funded by the Saudi government, and they never denied that, actually. So the structure of these propaganda organizations that I mentioned is also not very clear because it's very complicated. It's compiled of different sources of funding, and they're either associated with different governments or organizations. And the target audience, as I said, are the Iranian society because the content is in Persian. And the target audience is selected because the purpose is to create more dissatisfaction inside Iran so that a regime change would be facilitated. And that's also with the sanctions, like economic sanctions are meant to create dissatisfaction inside the country and make people angry against their government. And when it's coupled with economic mismanagement, it is intensified. So they used, there are questions to ask about how they used these techniques. As I said, social media was the main platform that they used it. I've actually, there were also a lot of outrageous lies coming, and I've done an article on that, which is available, and you can look about the fake news that exist surrounding Iran. And it's like there is no desire for fact checking when it comes to Iran because most of the contents are in Farsi. It's very difficult to find a source to verify, and it's very easy to lie about everything. So as I said, the value system that exists in Iran and is, according to different polls inside and outside Iran, is supported still by the majority of Iranians, even though this is declining, is attacked. And there are different themes that are represented and that are focused. And the counter propaganda against this propaganda by the Iranian government is almost non-existent because they're not professional in media production, and even there is one English speaking channel, and that's sanctioned by a lot of these governments, and are taken down from the satellite. And there is also not the urge because inside Iran a lot of people already know about those lies. So it would be very interesting to study the effect of it, like and a public opinion survey of the Iranian society would be a very good complementary to this study. And I hope at some point we will have something like that. And so these are the themes that I found. Like mostly they wanted to dictate that Islam is unpopular among Iranians. All clergymen are members of the quote unquote regime. So that's okay to attack them and everything. And political Islam is inherently problematic. So again, as I said, like that's a major part of Islamophobia. And some of them even were saying Islam is the problem. So if you don't have women's rights in your country, it's because of your, Islamic laws. You get rid of that and then just keep Islam in your houses and you will be free from all the problems that you have. So, and these are the roots of the problem that they were trying to dictate. I guess I'm running out of time, right? So I think, just to wrap it up, I think it's very important that while I believe that people should be free to practice what they think, and when people are angry, you might see instances of Islamophobic slogans or actions. We have to be very careful not to glorify those actions, like especially, as Muslims, but also non-Muslims. I allow you to practice what you believe, but I'm not going to glorify you and describe it as heroic and brave, like a lot of these media were actually doing. Like this young, brave man is tossing up some like random clergy's turban, and this is suddenly heroic. If you did it in English, it would get a lot of attacks, even with from the people who probably were against Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We have The Case of Malaysia by Dr. Azian binti Ali. She's a senior lecturer at the Department of Islamic History and Civilization, Academy of Islamic Studies, University of Malaya. Her teaching, research, and publications cover history of Islamic institution, history of Islamic education, history of Islamic architecture in Malaysia, Muslim scholarship, and biographical studies. She has published a number of articles, proceedings, chapters, and books related to her expertise. Her book entitled Methodology of Islamic Historical Research was published in 2022. And in 2019, she was invited as a keynote speaker at the 6th Eurasian Conference on Language and Social Sciences in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. And she spoke on sources and writing history of mosques in Malaysia. Dr. Ali?
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Amma ba'd. Okay, I'm going to cover, waiting for the slide. Okay, I'm going to cover on the historical backdrop of the Islamophobia in Malaysia, roots, challenges, and solution. Okay, I will speak on introduction, definition, methodology, findings, religions in Malaysia, roots of Islamophobia, challenges, solution, and conclusion. Okay. Islamophobia manifests itself in public and private spaces where Muslims are viewed as suspect and unwelcome. In workplace discrimination, where Muslim practices such as wearing a scarf and praying are prohibited. In traditional and social media and political discourse, where Muslims are portrayed as violent, misogynist, and untrustworthy. Descriptions of Muslim as uncivilized and violent also help rationalize European colonial domination of most of the Muslim majority world. American scholar Edward Said, died 2003, used the term Orientalism to describe the pattern of negativity stereotyping Muslims and other colonized peoples. So let's see, the Oxford Dictionary traced back the usage of Islamophobia since 1920s. And rising in 1997 onwards. Malaysia, as a country, emerges 6 years after its independence was announced on 31st August 1957, which was known as Tanah Melayu, Malay land. It was declared that Islam is the official religion and the king are Malay Muslim. Our new Prime Minister is Anwar Ibrahim, lead 33.57 million populations, including Malay, Chinese, Indians, and others who are Muslim, Christian, Buddhists, and Hindus, and other religions, Sikh as well. So let's see the definition of Islamophobia. This morning we got a question from one participant asking about the definition. So here I bring definition by Bridge, Georgetown University. Islamophobia is an extreme fear of and hostility toward Islam and Muslim, which often leads to hate speech, hate crimes, as well as social and political discrimination. It can be used to rationalize policies such as mass surveillance, incarceration, imprisonment, and disenfranchisement, and can influence domestic and foreign policy. This is the United Nations definition of fear, prejudice, and hatred of Muslims that leads to provocation, hostility, and intolerance by means of threatening, harassment, abuse, incitement, and intimidation of Muslims and non-Muslims, both in the online and offline world, motivated by institutional, ideological, political, and religious hostility that transcends into structural and cultural racism, which targets the symbols and markers of being a Muslim. This working definition of Islamophobia recommended by Prof. Imran and Dr. Irene to the United Nations. And let's see what English dictionary said about these words. Dislike of or prejudice against Islam or Muslims, especially as a political force. Unreasonable. Since this morning we heard about this unreasonable, irrational, dislike or fear of and prejudice against Muslim or Islam. And exaggerated fear of Islam, which fits racial violence, intolerance, and vilification, while elements of Sharia are unacceptable to Western sensibilities on objective legal ground. Example, Islamic succession law. Other aspects are socially admirable. Example, Islamic banking and finance, and some, such as hijab, are legally irrelevant unless they raise actual legal issues such as security. This is from Australian Law Dictionary, 3rd edition, published by Oxford Press. Hatred or fear of a Muslim or of their politics or culture. And Macmillan, hatred or fear of Muslim and Islam. Okay, the question is, does Islamophobia exist in Malaysia? So data need to be collected in answering the question with evidence. So the methodology, so elements of Islamophobia in this infographic, fear. I'm looking for the fear, hatred, prejudice, intolerance, discrimination, contempt. Okay, methods of data collection. I use documentation, media, social, internet sources, and I do an observation, political speech, religious speech, Parliament sessions, gathering during festival season, religious celebration for a Muslim, Hari Raya, Eid al-Fitr, Chinese New Year, Thaipusam, and Deepavali. So methods of analysis, content analysis, inductive, deductive, and comparative analysis. Okay, findings, roots. So it can be in two poles, external and internal, rooted from the West minority Muslim country and Middle East majority Muslim. And internal among Muslims themselves, there's also Islamophobia and non-Muslim. Okay, Islamophobia rooted from misconception, misinterpretation, corruption of knowledge, secondary and tertiary sources of Islam. They refer to secondary and tertiary sources. So create misconception and misinterpretation. Label. They love to label Muslim as terrorists and so forth. So if we are looking for the discrimination against and violation the rights of Muslim in Malaysia by the government, we will approaching a failure. Our Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia mentioned and ratified that Islamophobia does not exist in Malaysia. Findings exhibit that the main populations, including Malay, Chinese, and Indian, live in peace and harmony under Muslim Malay leaders. In fact, Islamophobia does not exist in terms of dislike of or prejudice against Islam or Muslim, especially as a political force. There is no place for Islamophobia in Malaysia. However, there are several individuals I must mention here who spread hatred among Muslim and non-Muslim toward Islam in Malaysia and labeling it with unkind words. Okay, I bring one case study, only one, because we have limited time. Okay, only one case study. Activist warns Malaysia of religious tyranny. The word tyranny is very strong there. There's no tyranny in Malaysia. It's funny because the reporter, whose name is in Malay Mail, named Setrah, Indian. So the title is very strong, religious tyranny. There's no tyranny in Malaysia in terms of practicing their religious. Whether you are Muslim, Christian, they are free to practice their religion in Malaysia. We got mosque, we got temple, we got church. In Malaysia, we are free to practice our religion without fear. So this case confirmed the fact that Islamophobia is propagated through media voices. The challenge is how to combat the labeling and bad report on Islam and Muslim on the media and literature, how to counterback authors and writers who are misinterpreting Islam and Muslim. For an example, connecting the act of terrorism to the teaching of Islam. I myself profoundly believe that Islam promotes peace and harmony in line with the meaning of the words Islam. Islam is peace. Promoting model of Muslim country who live in peace and harmony. So here, some solution I would like to propose. Islamophobia. Okay, the origin in Oxford Dictionary, Islamophobia. I must propose to pronounce it Islam zero phobia, not Islamophobia. O means you welcome phobia. Am I right? Islam zero phobia. We need to promote that. Phobia, the suffix, an extreme or irrational fear of or aversion to something. It develops when a person has an exaggerated or unrealistic sense of danger, about a situation or object. According to Howard E. Levine of Harvard Medical School, a phobia is a persistent, excessive, unrealistic fear of an object, person, animal, or situation. It is a type of anxiety disorder, the phobia. A phobic person needs medical help to live more healthy and normal. For an example, he or she can be treated by cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. So the solution of Islamophobia, there are medical approach, legal action, neutral report by media, education, and anti-labeling, anti-label. Okay, this is Malaysia government, legal action by Malaysia government. In combating Islamophobia, Malaysia has an Act 15th Sedition Act 1948 and Internal Security Act 1960. Section 73, Internal Security Act 1960, any police officer may, without warrant, arrest and detain pending inquiries any person in respect of whom he has reason to believe that there are grounds which would justify his detention under Section 8 and that he has acted or is about to act or is likely to act in any manner prejudicial to the security of Malaysia or any part thereof or to maintenance of essential services therein or to the economic life thereof. Section 8, power to order detention or restriction of persons, in bracket number 1, if the minister is satisfied that the detention of any person is necessary with a view to preventing him from acting in any manner prejudicial to the security of Malaysia or any parts thereof, or to the maintenance of essential services therein or the economic life thereof, he may make an order, hereinafter referred to as a detention order, directing that that person be detained for any period not exceeding 2 years. Okay, this is the laws of Malaysia, Act 15. How many minutes do I have? 3 minutes. Okay then. Okay, skip this one. Okay, next is education. We need to raise awareness on the beauty of Islam and promote Islamophilia instead of Islamophobia. Nurture positive and healthy mind. Culture good attitudes toward others, because there are other phobia, xenophobia. Xenophobia, so we need to culture good attitudes towards others, breed civilized citizen. And neutral report, train our authors, writers, and reporters to be professional and neutral, not biased in their report. Breed responsible authors and writers to spread harmony and serenity in the mind of our society and country. Anti-label by media, stop labeling Muslim as a terrorist and being double standard. Refer to the case of the attack of a Muslim in church by Christian. There is no headline mentioning attackers as terrorists. Stop describe the law of Islam as tyranny or Muslim as uncivilized and so forth. So this is the example of labeling following organization as terrorists. Yeah. And then United Nations pronounced 15 March as an International Day to combat Islamophobia. So the conclusion, Islamophobia is an act of denial of the right of Muslims to live and practice their faith without fear or retribution. It is not only a prejudice, but also a flagrant violation of fundamentals human rights. Therefore, if we allow Islamophobia to continue to be unabated, it will jeopardize the efforts toward peace and harmony in the society. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. So the last speaker we have will be joining us online, the case of Pakistan, Dr. Mohammed Junaid Ghauni. He's a lecturer in media studies at the International Islamic University in Islamabad, Pakistan, and his research interests include Islam and Muslims in global media, Orientalism, othering, international communication, and political communication. He has so far published 29 research publications in national and international research journals.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Am I audible? Am I audible to everybody?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. First of all, I am very much thankful to the SIGA and Professor Dr. Sami for this opportunity to speak about Islamophobia, its roots in Pakistan, and for this opportunity to share the case of Pakistan with this learned group of people. I would talk about the roots of Islamophobia in Pakistan, and then at the end, I would be sharing some researchable questions for the listeners and for the participants and for future research. I will start my talk with a famous poet's saying about the Islamophobia and Islamophilia kind of situation in Pakistan. It's in our national language, Urdu. The words goes like, Rahmate Sayyide Laulaq pe Kamil Iman, Ummate Sayyide Laulaq se Khauf aata hai. I would like to translate it in English. We can translate it like, I have a perfect and absolute belief in the mercy and kindness of I'm sorry for the interruption. I have a perfect and absolute belief in the mercy and kindness of the Prophet, peace be upon him. But it's the followers of the Prophet, mercy, peace be upon him, I am scared of. So this beautiful shair, Mr. Iftikhar Arap, has actually summed up the feelings of many people here in Pakistan about their feeling about Islamophobia. Now, talking about particularly the roots of Islamophobia in Pakistan, what we have observed here and we have studied here is Soviet-Afghan War, which was in it's considered as the beginning of Islamophobic tendencies in Pakistan. And let me tell you how it has, this particular war has caused, or you can say the played the role of catalyst to produce the Islamophobic tendencies. Like political Islam was institutionalized in Pakistan actually to fight this war in Afghanistan. State level efforts were made to fight war on religious lines in the form of jihad by creating dichotomies like Muslim, Kafir, and Shahadat, etc. A kafir is, you can translate it like the non-believer. Fighting this war on secular or traditional fight footings wouldn't work here. So this resulted in the disturbance in social fabric in Pakistan. And not only the social fabric, but it ultimately translated into the security and economic disturbances in Pakistan also. In terms of security, in terms of life loss, in terms of financial losses, Pakistan has lost a lot, and there is a plethora of research that we can quote here. After the war was over, the reverse engineering was not attempted to contain the groups who fought the war, or who were made to fight, who were trained to fight, or who were encouraged to fight that war. The same groups after the war used the same religious slogans and the rhetoric to gather mass, logistics, and revenues for their survival, and to emerge as an influential pressure group in religious attire on Pakistan. This is how the seeds of the political Islam sowed in Pakistan. When I say political Islam, I have the company of learned scholars around us. This is very much clear that the effort to grab the power and to implement the self-suited and self-translated version of Islam as a system of politics in a society. So this is how the seeds of the political Islam sowed in Pakistan. There is a clear distinction between Islamic landscape in Pakistan before and after Afghan jihad. From a moderate and peaceful Islamic society to a radical political Islamic society. No efforts have been made to revert the war-oriented, created jihadist Islamic ideology, and to dismantle and disassemble such jihadist groups. Such and for their survival, they institutionalize themselves on the basis of religion in various parts of Pakistan, with names like Jaish-e-Muhammad, Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, Sipah-Sahaba, Tehreek-e-Labbaik, etc. And then, of course, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, that is the TTP. Their existence with peculiar attire, along with the Kalashnikov and various other automatic weapons and flags, created terror and horror among the simple law-abiding, religion-loving citizens in Pakistan. The citizens felt scared from playing music in public, to the dance on weddings, to the female education, to the co-education. This situation created a clear divide between normal religion followers and the religious fanatics in Pakistan. Apart from Afghan war, Pakistan, right from its inception, is part of another war, which we call here is Kashmir War. Independence of Kashmir is projected and portrayed as the lifeline for Pakistan over the decades. This war again is religion-based and has produced religious freedom fighters in the name of Mujahideen, and their existence in almost every part of Pakistan has terrified normal religion followers. A normal religious mind feels fearful and scared of such version of Islam, that is the political Islam. Religious fanatic groups, despite being very small in number, but being violent and for enjoying political power or the support of political powers, political parties, they are causing Islamophobia among normal citizens who otherwise are also true followers of religion, and they are very loving, religion-loving people. Um, Religious intolerance is another key factor that creates or become a catalyst in creating Islamophobia in Pakistan, in like many other Muslim majority countries. Murder of Salman Taseer. Salman Taseer's murder took place in January 2011, and he was the governor of the biggest province of Pakistan, Punjab, and he was sitting governor of Punjab, but he was shot dead by his own security guard, which ultimately who was ultimately sentenced, and that is a huge case of Islamophobia, and it is a worth studying case, by the way. Murder of Mashal Khan, another important case which occurred in April 2017 in Abdul Wali Khan University in another province of Pakistan, that is the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. He was a university student, and he was murdered by his, actually brutally murdered by his fellow Muslim students. He was a Muslim and murdered by Muslims. And again, he was accused for blasphemy. Murder of a Christian teenager on accusation of burning the Holy Quran, and there are many other examples which we can quote as the cause of Islamophobia and the indication of intolerance, religious intolerance in Pakistan society. Self-suited and dichotomous interpretations of Islam, binary interpretations of Islam that cause sectarianism, lack of knowledge, and ignorance about the true teachings of Islam, Quran, and the Sirah are few other essential factors that create or become catalysts in creating Islamophobia in Pakistan. Here, I would like to quote another example of a person who was lynched in Punjab, the biggest province of Pakistan, and again on the same kind of accusation, that is the disrespecting Holy Quran, and that happened recently in February. I mean, in the last month, not before 1 month. Similarly, a Sri Lankan citizen who was killed in Sialkot on similar allegation. He was killed, actually burned by his fellow workers because of the disrespecting the Holy Quran and some other verses of Holy Quran. So the political Islam, the implementation and enforcement of radical Islam, religious intolerance, lack of education, sectarianism are some of the key factors that cause Islamophobia in Muslim majority countries like Pakistan, and particularly in Pakistan. A layman who loves and practices Islam feels scared to even talk about Islam. I mean, because supposedly this is not the arena or the topic of discussion for a common Muslim, even if he is a university professor. However, there is a dire need, and this is not by the way written somewhere, but this is the sprinter groups in the form of mujahideen, in the form of the religious political parties, those who claim that this is not their arena, not in written, but whenever somebody talks about it, they say that you are not a Muslim scholar, Islamic scholar, and you go and read the teachings of the Englishmen. However, there is a dire need to explore more deeply and scientifically the root causes of Islamophobia in Pakistan, to explore the relationship between Islamophilia and Islamophobia. I mean, Islamophilia, we believe that the love for Islam is not a bad thing, or even practicing in masjid, mosque, or in person, or having Islam in your personal life is nothing wrong. but still there is Islamophobia, and that Islamophobia appears when the manifestations of that love takes place in some violent forms that I've just mentioned, few of the cases. Relationship between the religious loving or religious following, religion following minds and a mind that intends to forcefully implement Islam. All these aspects that I've just mentioned, these are very important aspects to dig more about and to study about. An Islamophobic mind is an Islamophilic mind is not essentially a radical Islamic mind. This is what I have inferred from my studies so far, and this is what food for thought I would leave here for the learned scholars, what I would propose that we should be working on, especially when we talk about Islamophobia in the Muslim majority countries. With that, I would again, to reiterate my point, I would repeat the same words of the poet that I've mentioned in the beginning, that the Rahmate Sayyade Laulaq pe Kamil Iman, Ummate Sayyade Laulaq se khauf aata hai. I have a perfect and absolute belief in the mercy and kindness of the Prophet, peace be upon him, but it's the followers of the Prophet of mercy, peace be upon him, that I am scared of. Thank you very much, and I hope to listen to the other scholars also. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ghari. Okay, I'm quickly going to summarize everyone's papers and then we'll open it up to Q&A from the audience. So we had Dr. Nabeel Saadoun, who talked about there's a need for introspection and organization within Muslim communities themselves when it comes to representation about Islam and Muslims. We had Dr. Aktay, who talked about how secularism in the form of Kemalism erased Islam from the public sphere in Turkey and amplified tropes that Islam is viewed as like uncivilized or backwards and labeled the enemy of progress to justify the secularization. Dr. Sadeqi, for a case of Iran, you talked about how the role of social media and certain channels in amplifying Islamophobic discourse. And I think the important part there was there's no moderation when it comes to these channels, and they're able to say very extreme rhetoric that wouldn't be present within English speaking, but because there's no moderation, it kind of is left on its own over there. And criticizing political Islam is an avenue in which Islamophobia has become accepted. And I think you can see that in plenty of other places as well. Dr. Ali, you talked about the case of Malaysia, and you talked about how there are certain individuals who use their platform to spread hatreds towards Islam. And it's almost like creating divisions between communities. And I think we can see that in a lot of places where there's a lot of hyperpolarization between different communities, and some individuals take that to their advantage. And then we had Dr. Junaid Ghauni, who talked about how the Soviet war has played a catalyst in Islamophobia in Pakistan, particularly with the institutionalization of political Islam in the forms of very small religious groups that grew out of the Afghan war. And they've been able to take a foothold and kind of dictate the narratives around Islam. Yeah, so those were all of our panelists. I'm going to open it up to audience Q&A. We've got around 10 minutes or so. And if you can be brief with your questions.
Thank you. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mariam Khan. I'm a PhD fellow here. Can we ask a question from the online speakers? Are they with us?
With who?
The online speaker.
Is Dr. Ghari online with us? He should be online, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so my question is for Dr. Ghari, that how does he define Islamophobia? Dr. Ghari mentioned blasphemy, and he mentioned about some banned religious groups in Pakistan. But as far as I learned about Pakistani society, despite being, despite these blasphemy attacks and terrorist attacks, the state is working to establish some Islamic laws time and again, because what sells there is religion. So how does he define Islamophobia? Because when he started his narration with the poet who says that I am in love with the Seerah, but I'm afraid of the people who follow that Seerah, it seems that an Islamophobe is talking from the other side. So please, if you define Islamophobia again, and then you link it with the blasphemy and banned religious groups, it would be easy to understand that where are you coming from. Thank you.
Should I speak?
Get everybody's questions. Okay, we'll take 2 more questions and then we'll let the panelists answer. We have so. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. My question for Dr. Aktay. I wanted to ask Joseph Lawrence in Coping with Defeat. He said that the fall of the caliphate was because of the formation actually of the modern nation state, and this is what really dislocated like ummatic, like their epistemic centeredness. So I wanted to know, what are your thoughts on this, especially given the formations of the nation state in regards to Turkish nationalism and Islamophobia? Thank you.
I have a question for Dr. Nabeel. I agree with you that you are saying that we need to introspect ourselves also. We are looking only for the West. But somehow, like, for example, we are talking a lot about Islam and we all are Muslims. But where is the baseline for us in this modern world currently? Because whenever we are looking, we are comparing with the West, how much modern people are. Somebody in the suit and somebody on the traditional Islamic dress, how we are seeing in our Muslim societies. Like, we had to put the baseline for us, how West is defining Islam, but not the way we should look for it. So I'm sometimes confused that are we giving real knowledge to our children's or future generations, which they are proud, which they must be proud of. But somehow we are giving West more powers to define Islam, to define it as an Islamophobia, define what is good and what is bad, because they are defining everything according to themselves. So I just want to ask you that how we can create that baseline somehow, that we say that we don't need to defend Islam. Actually, the things which are coming from West are irrational for Islam, because our own generations don't know exactly what we are looking for and what we have in our bellies.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with the first question. It was for Dr. Ghari. What is Islamophobia? And if you can keep your responses to about 2 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yes, you are.
Okay. First of all, I would like to object on the label that I've just received, that I'm an Islamophobe. I'm not an Islamophobe, please. What I've said is that the person who have asked question, she would know that what I actually mentioned, that when a banned group or a religious political party comes on the road with hundreds of people, and then they break windows of the cars with the families in the cars, and they burn the buildings, and other even the law enforcement people are getting hurt when they are on the roads. These are the people who are actually creating the fear for Islam. And they say that the person who, for instance, in case of Salman Taseer, she must know that, she would have read that in case of Salman Taseer, we have a clear divide in our society, that there are people who believe that Mumtaz Qadri, who murdered that person, he was a righteous person, and once he was sentenced to death, he was a martyr. Nobody talks about Salman Taseer. So this is not me who is giving any kind of verdict. I'm just giving you the picture what is happening here in Pakistan. So there are people. I mean, what was Salman Taseer saying? Salman Taseer was giving his opinion, being governor of the biggest province of Pakistan. He was giving his opinion about the blasphemy laws. So he was not rejecting any law. He was not blaspheming any sculpture, any, for instance, any perspective of Prophet peace be upon him. But he was murdered, and his family is scared of living in Pakistan. And similarly, there are many other cases. Let me quote you again the case of Mashal Khan. So I'm not an Islamophobe, and for me, the definition of Islamophobia is the same definition of Islamophobia that everybody quotes and read. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Aktay, there was a question for you on Turkey.
Thank you for that question about the formation of nation states. Has anything to do with the Islamophobic affairs, or I try to underline one of the conditions for the Muslims. I called it postmodern, post-caliphate conditions. We are in a post-caliphate condition, and this didn't come as spontaneously. Of course, it came after a defeat of the Muslim world, a defeat of the Muslim political body, the Muslim state body. I mean, after it was defeated in the First World War. And what happened to the Muslim world in general was the abolishment of the caliphate and the formation of new nation states, one of whose main mission was to cleanse Islam from the political sphere, from the social, even the social sphere. Was Islamophobia indeed? I mean, because the Islamophobia was the actor which was killed, and if and there was murdered, and not, rather than being killed, it was murdered, and this murder always, create a sort of psychological situation, like fearing from the ghost which will come out and make a revenge from those who murdered, from the murderers, and the murderers are those rulers of the Muslim society. Therefore, I mean the fear of the Muslim states, not to say Muslim states, of course, the states who are ruling the Muslims are fearing from Islam, because Islam was something which was being murdered by themselves, and they are afraid about any ghost to be coming and making its revenge. Of course, now there is another dynamics for Islamophobia in this Muslim mode of and this Islam is I think it is synonymous with fear of democracy, not Islam. And Islam is identified with democracy because the majority of the Muslims are Muslims. The majority of the societies are Muslims, and if a democracy is open to the society or to the people, and what will come out is Islam, nothing else. So the authoritarian regime are afraid of democracy much more than afraid Islam. So fear of Islam is not but a fear of democracy from my point of view. Ikhwan, for example, the Ikhwan Muslim Brotherhood is being demonized, demonization of Muslim Brotherhood is nothing else than Islamophobia. I mean, they say we are Muslims, they are not real Muslims, but what is identified with them, with the Muslim Brotherhood, is only the Muslim values, for example, justice, freedom, honor. That is what we need, what we understand from Islam indeed, and not because they are terrorists, but because they remind them the possibility of a willing society, a willing people. Remember the motto in the Arab Spring was "Ash-Sha'b yurid." The people are willing, and these willing people is I think representing something else now. I mean, it is not Islam as such, but Islam. What is behind Islam? What is being represented by anything Islamic? And if Islam is, for example, representing independence, for example, it is very much afraiding the Western world, but also those authoritarian regimes alike.
Thank you, Dr. Aktay. Dr. Saadoun, we had a question for you of how do or can we as Muslims define ourselves?
Thank you so much for your question, and I would like to answer it by saying yes, we ought to redefine ourselves. We should not allow others to define us. We actually should define ourselves as the universal faith. Islam did not start with Prophet Muhammad, how great he is, yes, but Islam started actually with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating Adam and sending him as a prophet, and also followed by many, many other prophets, concluded by the last message, which is Muhammad. And that we should be sometimes a little offensive, saying that the greatest mistake done by the Jewish people are rejecting Jesus Christ or Prophet Isa alayhi salam. And the gravest mistake committed by the Christians also rejecting another prophet who's Muhammad. And that Islam is the only religion that qualified to be the universal faith, because we accept all messages, all original messages, and all original messengers and true messengers. Thus, actually, we have to have this power and strength that we are on the right track. And if there is some mistakes or shortcomings from the Muslim nation or Muslim individuals, that happens in any nation. Look, always dealing with others, when you live with others as an individual or as a community or as a country or as a nation among other nations, if you are received as an enemy, you will be attacked. If you are received as suspicious, you will be sealed. You will be actually controlled. You will be they will try to limit your powers or actually destroy you from within. If you are received as neutral, you will be marginalized. If you are received as trusted, you will be absorbed, or you will be trusted. If you are received as very respected, have many benefits to the community or to the country or to the world, so you will be supported. And if you are received as have a great and strategic benefits to human society, you will be given leadership positions. And we have actually to look at ourselves as in what level you are looked at by the rest of the world. We will not score enough. So we have, as this generation, the generation of youth, the future of Islam, we have actually to start to look at ways to ascend that ladder, so to speak. And I would say, strategically speaking, because I love strategy. My specialty is strategic building, crafting. Within 50 years, we have to be one major power in the world as Muslim nation. Within 100 years or so, we have actually to be ready to transfer power from parts of the world around the heart to the heart itself, the heart of Prophet, the heart of civilization. This is actually requires a lot of work, concerted work.
You, Dr. Saadoun, sorry.
In order to actually combat not only Islamophobia, but also animosity among humanity itself that is carried by Islamophobic people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We'll take one question for Dr. Ali. Do we have a microphone?
Thank you very much. My question to Dr. Nabeel, at the beginning of his lecture, he said that we should also criticize ourselves, because when we look at it from our side, we are also fostering the Islamophobia. There are around 50 Muslim countries, but you argue that there is no well-established model of the Muslim country. So my question is, in what way do you think Muslim countries not being a model contribute to the rise of the Islamophobia? And what is missing, in the process of rise of the Islamophobia? And what should be done as Muslims? What should be done to lessen the gravity of the Islamophobia going on around? The other question to all the panelists, they all talked about the political Islam, because it's an ongoing discussion, not only in Turkey, but also in many other places. What do you think of political Islam? How did it, or how does it contribute, to rise of Islam? Did political Islam contribute to the solution of the problems, or did the political Islam, foster the rise of the Islamophobia? So these are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to start Dr. Sadeqi for the political Islam question, if you'd like to take that. The role, do you want, Dr. Saadoun, if you want to go?
After her is okay. All right. Two parts of your question, actually. Let me, once I met with Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, one of the greatest scholars of India, and he told me that North India is sort of animosity toward Islam. South India is so cordial about Islam. And the reason is that the way they received Islam historically, from the north, they received Islam through the Mughal, the new Muslim Mughals dynasty, who actually came into India with powers, and sometimes they were not really well established in Islam, so they committed some mistakes or violence and so forth. So that affected the attitude toward Islam in North India. But in South India, they received the early Sahaba and also the merchants and so on. So they received Islam in a very cordial way. So we have, yes, to criticize ourselves sometimes in the way we implement Islam or present Islam to others. The political Islam actually is a new term that I don't agree with, because Islam is a total way of life,
Dr.
including.
Saadoun, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. We've got 90 seconds because we've got to round up a bit. So if you want to talk after the session as well, please do. I'm going to let Dr. Sadiqi about the role of political Islam in solutions or causing problems.
When criticizing political Islam or just any system, we have to be very careful on what are our criteria for assessing a political system's success or failure. Are we adopting Eurocentric definitions of, let's say, welfare and freedom and successful political system, or are we actually defining things based on the needs and requirements of our own societies? What I see is that usually like the hegemony is setting the criteria, and we are comparing ourselves or assessing ourselves against all those criteria. We're not setting the criteria for assessing our performance ourselves. And I think that's the problem. Like, we allow outsiders to say if we are successful or not. Maybe if, as long as our people are satisfied with a political system, it means it's working and it's functioning. And like throughout history, there are ups and downs, and it's a curve. Like sometimes, like there was a time centuries ago that like Islam was at the forefront of science and knowledge production. Now we are well behind it, and now if we continue, we might come back. I mean, it's just, you know, nations and notions come up and go down, and I don't think. I think it should be internal assessment based on our own criteria.
Thank you. And I have one last question for Dr. Ali. Can you elaborate on the idea of dealing with or eliminating Islamophobia through medical and what you meant by that?
Okay, thank you for the question. The phobic person need medical helps, because as defined by medical board, phobic is anxiety disorder, is an anxiety disorder. So anxiety disorder can be handled by medical team, not someone like a layman that don't have knowledge how to handle anxiety person. Anxiety disorder is kind of mental illness. So the phobic person need help from medical teams, not preachers. So because anxiety cannot be handled by preaching the beauty of Islam, so need help in terms of cognitive, the way he thinks, the methodology of thinking, the way he or she understand things, and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a final round of applause for all of our speakers? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mubashra, for this engaging discussion. Thank you for everyone for presenting your views in this. I think it was very illuminating and good start. We have just a few mementos that I would like to give our speakers, and then I'd like to ask everyone to have every speaker, presenter, and moderator to come to the stage. We're going to have a group picture after we present to them the mementos. Do you have, Jamila? I want to ask to the stage Dr. Nabeel Saadoun. Dr. Yasin Aktay. Dr. Azian. And watch. Be all together. Now, a presenter or a moderator, please come forward. Presenters or author, if you're here and the author of that paper or a moderator, please come forward, take one picture, and then we'll take a break. And after the break, we're gonna meet in the parallel session.
Oh, mashallah. Sir.
I mean, it's all safe. Quick. Thank you so much. All right.